Harry Baxter was a natural seducer, a man whose charisma was in the air, attracting attention even when he was silent. His voice, low and slightly hoarse, sounded like a mesmerizing melody, and the look in his dark eyes could make your heart beat faster. He was always perfectly dressed, expensive suits, as if tailored especially for him, made from the finest fabric, emphasized his athletic physique. His well-groomed hair always lay neatly, as if he had just left the salon, but at the same time it looked natural and relaxed. Harry's main goal seemed to be seducing married women. He found in this process something more than just pleasure. This was his art, his challenge, his passion. Harry carefully chose his victims, as he sometimes called them to himself with a smile, although there was no hint of malicious intent in this. He believed that he was simply helping these women feel wanted again, filling their lives with bright colors that they may have been missing. Each of his hunts was carefully planned. He learned their habits, tastes, interests, so that every interaction seemed like a perfect match. A meeting in an art gallery, a chance encounter on the tennis court, or an unexpected acquaintance in a cozy coffee shop, all this was his scene where he shone as a leading actor. But the most amazing thing about Harry was the way he acted when he was with these women. He knew how to listen as if everything else in the world ceased to exist. His compliments sounded sincere, and his gestures were filled with unobtrusive care. A light touch of the hand, an attentive look, a warm laugh, all this turned ordinary moments into unforgettable ones. However, his charm was not only in words and gestures. Harry exuded confidence, but not smugness. He was courteous, but not intrusive. In his presence, women felt beautiful, unique, as if he saw something in them that no one else noticed. For many, it was a breath of fresh air, an opportunity to break out of routine and feel alive again. Harry worked as a salesman, a job that seemed to suit his personality perfectly. After graduating from school, when the choice of life paths was open to him, he did not think twice. Taking a job at a small consignment car dealership in his mid-sized hometown, Harry accepted the job as a temporary step, but soon realized that his natural qualities began to reveal themselves in full force. This car dealership was located in an inconspicuous area, but had a strong reputation for honesty and personal approach to customers. Harry quickly fit in with the team, but unlike other employees who simply did their jobs, he turned the sales process into an art. A smile, a friendly tone, and the ability to find a common language with customers, all this made Harry a magnet for customers. In a short time, he became the best salesman, and even the most complex transactions were completed casually. The secret of his success was simple. He knew how to listen. When a customer came into the dealership, Harry didn't just start showing cars. He asked questions, was interested in their needs, life stories, aspirations. For each family, he found a car that suited them perfectly. Whether someone dreamed of a powerful SUV for traveling or an economical car for the city, Harry always offered exactly what was needed, often also giving valuable advice that inspired trust. 5 years later, his hard work and charisma led to unexpected success. He saved up enough money to buy out this same car dealership. Under his management, the business began to flourish, and Harry was soon able to open 2 more salons in neighboring areas. His car dealerships became known far beyond the city, and the name of Harry Baxter became a kind of brand associated with quality, attention to detail, and an individual approach. It was during this period, when his life became more stable, that Harry accidentally discovered his main hobby. One of the properties Harry had recently purchased employed a saleswoman named Marilyn Bordon. She was 35 years old, but her well-groomed appearance and energy made her look younger. At first glance, it was clear that Marilyn was a woman who knew how to present herself. Her long dark hair always lay perfectly, emphasizing her sophisticated face with expressive brown eyes. She had an attractive figure, slender but feminine, and always chose clothes that emphasized her assets while remaining within the bounds of decency. High heels, pencil skirts, and neatly ironed blouses became her signature. Marilyn was married to Terry, a simple but hard-working bricklayer. He knew a lot about his business and brought a stable income to the family, which allowed them to live quite well. They had 2 teenage children who were in high school. It was a strong and seemingly happy family that often gathered at the dinner table and discussed plans for the future. Terry adored his wife, and although he understood that her job involved a certain amount of client play, he was never jealous. On the contrary, they even joked about it, knowing that this was part of her sales talent. Marilyn, although she did not have the same gift of persuasion as Harry, still achieved impressive success. Her smile, sincere and warm, instantly won over her clients. But her main secret was her ability to find an approach to every person. She knew how to be patient and friendly, listening carefully to customer requests. In those moments when a customer was hesitant, she could subtly boost their confidence by adding a touch of humor or telling a story from her life. This created the feeling that Marilyn was not just a salesman, but a trusted friend. But it cannot be denied that her attractive appearance played a role. Marilyn knew how to use her natural gifts to make her clients feel special. She was a master of subtle gestures, a light touch on a client's hand during a conversation, a casual glance from under long eyelashes, a sincere laugh that seemed to invite him to relax and trust. When she got into a car, to show off its internal advantages, her skirt would rise slightly, revealing a little more than was customary, but always within limits. These details were subtle, but worked flawlessly. Marilyn herself was well aware of where the border was and never crossed it. Her flirting was light and innocent, more of a game than a real intention. After a successful transaction, she could hug the client tightly or shake hands with such warmth that no one felt there was a catch. This balance allowed her to remain within the bounds of decorum and maintain respect among both colleagues and clients. Terry also knew about her way of doing things, but treated it with humor. "If your smile sells cars, it means it's worth more than my brick," he said, laughing. Their family dynamic, filled with trust and ease, allowed Marilyn to feel confident. She was happy in her life, but sometimes she felt like her world was missing something more, some spark or adventure. Harry immediately felt attracted to her. He already had several women with whom he spent time both in and out of bed, but none of them were married, and they all wanted more time with Harry. He limited their access to him, since none of them seriously interested him. At that time, Harry Baxter was only 23 years old, but he already possessed a level of charm and confidence that seemed unattainable to his peers. He was a young man who was hard to miss in the crowd. His tall height, just over 6 feet, made him stand out among those around him. His slender but muscular physique, the result of an active lifestyle rather than hard training in the gym, attracted glances, and his easy, confident gait made his presence a natural center of any company. His sandy hair often looked as if it had been tossed by a light sea breeze, adding a casual and romantic touch to his look. Bright blue eyes, deep as the summer sky, were the most striking aspect of his appearance. They seemed to be able to look into the very soul of their interlocutor, arousing trust and even admiration. But Harry never relied solely on his appearance. He understood that beauty attracts, but only charisma and the ability to feel others help to retain attention. It was this ability to understand what the other person wants that was his main advantage. Harry, like an experienced psychologist, instantly read people's moods, desires, and fears. He didn't need to ask many questions to get a feel for what was expected of him. He could sense when a person needed support, a compliment, or simple confirmation of his decisions. This ability made him an exceptional conversationalist, to whom not only women were drawn, but also men who appreciated his sharp mind and ability to listen. His confidence was not intrusive, but natural. Harry never tried to seem better than he was, but his manners, voice, and gestures did their job. He was a man who knew how to find a balance between light playfulness and seriousness. This combination allowed him to easily win the hearts of girls and women, regardless of their age. Even during his school years, Harry enjoyed success with his classmates. At the time, it seemed like a simple game to him, an innocent way to test his strength. But with age, his charm became a real weapon, which he used masterfully. It didn't take much effort for him to get attention. One glance, a casual smile, or a casual compliment was enough to start a conversation that invariably led to what Harry wanted. At the same time, he remained charming not only on the outside, but also on the inside. Harry knew how to make his interlocutor feel important and unique. He understood that every person wants to be noticed, appreciated, and Harry always found words and gestures to satisfy this need. This is what made him not only attractive, but also unforgettable. When Harry purchased the property where Marilyn worked, his attention was immediately attracted to this spectacular woman. Her charm, professionalism, and easy self-confidence captivated him at first sight. For Harry, accustomed to noticing people and seeing their strengths and weaknesses, Marilyn immediately became an interesting object of observation. For several weeks, he carefully studied her manner of work, paying attention to every gesture, every smile, every intonation in her voice. She was a master of her craft, and Harry couldn't help but admire her ability to deal with clients. He quickly realized that her approach to sales was based on a subtle game: easy flirtation, friendliness, and the ability to make the client feel special. However, he also noticed that behind her smiles and warmth, there was a slight fatigue, a subtle sadness. Harry was an experienced observer, and it was not difficult for him to read in her eyes traces of the monotony of a life that, as he assumed, had long ago become predictable. While talking about business, Harry casually began asking questions to find out more about her. He found out that Marilyn had been married for 14 years and had 2 children who were in high school. Her husband, Terry, worked as a bricklayer, and their family lived fairly steadily thanks to his earnings and her variable commission income. But this information did not stop Harry. On the contrary, she only fueled his interest. Conquering Marilyn became a challenge for him, almost an art that he sought to master. Harry wasn't the type to want to ruin other people's lives. He respected personal boundaries, but at the same time believed that he could add spark to the lives of those who had lost it. He wanted to overcome the barriers she had erected, not to destroy her family, but to prove to himself that he could win even a woman like Marilyn, whose life was completely orderly at first glance. He began to act cautiously, using her own methods to get her attention. Harry found the right moments to compliment her appearance or outfits, choosing words that seemed sincere. "This color suits you. It highlights your professionalism and charm," he would say with a slight smile. Or he praised her negotiation skills, noting how skillfully she convinced the client. "Your ability is a talent, not just a skill. You literally create an atmosphere in which it is impossible to say no," he added. Gradually, he began to hint at her influence on men. Harry made it clear that he could see how she used her attractiveness and that it delighted him. But he did it so that his words did not seem judgmental. On the contrary, he said it with warm approval. "You know, Marilyn, it seems to me that you could sell ice to the Eskimos, but only because no one can resist your charm. I can't even imagine how men must restrain themselves from staying here for a long time just for your attention." These words sounded like a compliment, but there was always a slight hint of more. Harry knew very well how to make subtle hints without overstepping his bounds. He took every opportunity to make her feel special, wanted to remind her that she was not just a salesman, a wife, and a mother, but a beautiful and interesting woman who could captivate anyone. Marilyn liked Harry's compliments. He spoke to them with such sincerity and charming warmth that she began to believe his every word, although deep down she understood that this was his art. She enjoyed his attention, which was a pleasant contrast to the usual predictability of her life. And when he suggested having lunch together, she hesitated only for a moment before agreeing. This was their first personal time together outside of work, and in a sense, the first step beyond the ordinary. Harry took her to a cozy Italian restaurant, one of those where quiet music, soft light, and the aroma of freshly prepared dishes create an atmosphere of comfort and intimacy. The restaurant was expensive enough to be impressive, but not so expensive as to be ostentatious. Marilyn felt special, as if Harry had chosen this place specifically for her. They sat in a rounded booth in the corner of the hall, where they could talk without fear of being overheard. Dinner began with light wine, and Harry, as always, knew how to choose the perfect moment to make a casual compliment. "You know," he said, easily switching to a closer tone, "in this light your eyes seem even brighter. You should smile like that more often." His words made her feel a little embarrassed, but she couldn't hide her smile. The conversation flowed smoothly, moving from discussions of work to more personal topics. Harry took his time. He was a patient interlocutor, asking questions and listening carefully to her answers. He talked about himself with an ease and frankness that was disarming. His stories about his school years, his first steps in business, and relationships that didn't work out created an image of an honest and vulnerable person. This inspired trust. Marilyn, accustomed to being closed with her colleagues, unexpectedly began to share the details of her life. She talked about the children, about their successes at school, about how she and her husband spent their weekends. The wines and atmosphere did their job. They sat closer together, and Harry subtly closed the distance between them until their hips were next to each other. She knew what he was doing and could have moved away, but instead she let him move closer, as if testing how far he would go. At that moment, an electrical connection arose between them, which was in the air, but still remained undefined. Over the next 2 months, Harry worked patiently and methodically to win over Marilyn. He was a master of his game, and his strategy was not to rush, but to build a strong foundation of trust. He often came to the car dealership under the pretext of business matters, but always found time to chat with her. His compliments became more and more personal, and his presence became more and more meaningful to her. Harry knew how to win people over. He talked openly about himself, but never too much, giving her the feeling that this was a man who was honest and vulnerable. This disarmed Marilyn. Gradually, she began to believe that a true friendship was forming between them. She loved the way he made her feel important, beautiful, and needed. In response, she also opened up to him, something she had never done with anyone before. Marilyn began to talk about her life, about family worries, joys, and difficulties. She described the children, their characters, and plans for the future. She talked about her husband, kind, reliable, but sometimes too predictable. Terry was a good man, but their life together had become too regimented, too devoid of novelty. Although she never openly criticized him, Harry felt that her words were sometimes tinged with a hint of hidden dissatisfaction. He knew how to listen in such a way that her stories became more and more frank. She admitted that at times she feels like her sex life with her husband has lost its spark. These words were not spoken directly, but through slight hints, but Harry knew how to interpret them. He began to understand that she yearned for attention, passion, to feel wanted again. And this longing became for Harry a window into her inner world, which he intended to use to conquer her completely. Towards the end of their long lunch, Harry hugged Marilyn and kissed her on the lips. It took her by surprise, but also excited her. Hesitating a little, she returned his kiss. However, she soon pulled away, shocked by what had happened. Harry apologized and reassured her. They returned to work. The next day, Harry brought up the kiss and asked if she wanted more. Marilyn was confused again, but didn't say no. A week later, they found themselves in bed at a local motel during their lunch break. Harry was a skilled lover, and Marilyn quickly got over her guilt, enjoying every moment. Harry became the most experienced lover in her life. In addition, its size turned out to be larger than that of her husband or any previous partners. Their romance lasted about 6 months, moving from motels to Harry's apartment. However, the inevitable happened. Terry found out everything. One of his colleagues noticed Marilyn leaving the building where Harry lived and mentioned it to Terry. He had already begun to notice oddities in her behavior, especially on Tuesdays and Thursdays. Terry decided to follow her during his lunch break. Their marriage began to slowly crumble. Terry filed for divorce, and Harry became estranged from Marilyn. But Harry was now infected with a passion for married women. His used car business was doing well, but managing 3 locations at once proved to be a challenge. Harry was an excellent salesman, but his management skills were lacking. After another year, he sold the business. After moving to a neighboring city, Harry decided to try himself in a new direction. He got a job as a salesman in a fashionable clothing store located in the city center, where life was in full swing every day. This place was ideal for him. Here he met a variety of people, from students to businesswomen and wealthy ladies who were looking not just for things, but for attention and sophisticated service. Harry quickly settled in, and his natural charm and ability to connect with people made him a favorite among his clients. It was here that he met a new woman who soon became the next chapter of his story. Her name was Julia, she was 38 years old, and she was a buyer for one of the company's main clients. Julia was married, her husband ran a small construction company, and their life outwardly seemed quite prosperous. But from the very first meetings, Harry noticed in her eyes that it was very melancholy that he had learned to recognize unmistakably. Her smile was friendly but tired, and in the conversation about business, there were hints of a desire for something more. Harry began to act as carefully as he knew how. He always showed sincere interest in her work, asked about the intricacies of her choice of suppliers, and praised her taste and professionalism. When Julia closed a big deal through the store, Harry casually remarked, "You literally saved this season. With that kind of talent, you could run an entire chain of stores." These words not only flattered her, but also made her feel important and noticeable. Their communication quickly expanded beyond business topics. Harry knew how to talk to her, as if at that moment the whole world disappeared and only the two of them existed. He listened to her stories about family, work, and how difficult it is to balance between career and household responsibilities. Gradually, Julia began to open up, saying that her husband was often busy, that their communication had become rare and superficial. Her words were careful, but Harry detected notes of dissatisfaction in them. After a few weeks of their communication, he invited her to dinner. It was a neutral sentence, ostensibly about business matters, but the tone in which Harry said it hinted at something more. They met in a cozy French bistro with dim lighting and an intimate atmosphere. Harry again showed himself to be a master of unobtrusive seduction. Light compliments, sincere questions about her life, an attentive look that made Julia feel like the center of the universe. Their romance began as light flirting, but quickly grew into something more. Harry acted confidently, but carefully, realizing that Julia was not one of those who rushed headlong into the pool. He created a world for her where she felt wanted, important, free. Their first night took place in a hotel room, but soon Julia, feeling confident enough, began inviting Harry to her home. Julia's husband often went on business trips, which made their meetings safe. Harry took particular pleasure in making love in someone else's bedroom. For him, this was not just physical intimacy, but also a symbol of his power over someone else's space, someone else's life. Their intimate relationship often took place in Julia's marital bed, and this added spice to Harry's novels. He enjoyed the idea of breaking forbidden boundaries, but he did it so gracefully that Julia didn't feel guilty. Their relationship lasted about 6 months. It was an intense, vibrant relationship, full of passion, laughter, and mutual pleasure. But Harry always knew how to sense the moment when a romance was coming to its natural conclusion. They separated by mutual consent, without drama or hard feelings. Julia stayed with her husband, who never found out about the betrayal. For her, it was a short but vivid episode that filled her life with new emotions. Harry was pleased with how another of his stories ended on a high note. After several months of work in a new place, Harry again found himself in the center of events, which he knew how to masterfully direct according to his script. His attention was drawn to Susan Bordon, the company's assistant manager. She was a woman who seemed to be in perfect control of her life, always collected, with impeccable posture and an easy smile that hid her true feelings. Susan was attractive, tall and curvy, with a confident demeanor that turned off many men who dared flirt with her. Her deep brown eyes and wavy dark hair conveyed the image of a strong and independent woman, but Harry knew how to see more than the outer shell showed. Susan was married to Manny, a successful foreman at a construction company specializing in luxury homes. Their family life was busy and full of worries. Two teenage daughters demanded attention and support, and their 12-year-old son was always in search of new adventures. Manny, despite his busy schedule, tried to devote time to his family, but his tiring workdays and the predictability of the family structure left Susan feeling that something was missing in her life. Harry noticed her almost immediately. He noticed how confidently she gave orders and solved problems, and how other employees looked at her with respect. but he was especially interested in the fact that Susan seemed impervious to any signs of attention from men. This became a challenge for Harry, and he decided to act slowly, methodically, to melt her ice armor. For the first few weeks, Harry kept his interactions with Susan on a working basis, always respectful, always a little more attentive than the situation required. He knew how to give subtle compliments that didn't go overboard but made her feel noticed. "I've never met a person who handles such difficult tasks with such confidence," he said one day, looking straight into her eyes. His approach was so unobtrusive that Susan hardly noticed how he gradually became a part of her daily life. They often met at common events, exchanged jokes in the office, and discussed not only work issues, but also more personal topics. Harry skillfully found moments to talk about her family. The children aroused his sincere interest. He listened when Susan talked about her worries and cleverly implied that she deserved more than constant routine worries. By the 6th week of their relationship, Harry felt that her defenses were beginning to weaken. It was then that he invited her to lunch, choosing a cozy place for the meeting where he could relax and talk. It was a step that Susan didn't fully understand. She accepted the invitation, thinking it was just a friendly gesture, but the atmosphere and his unobtrusive attention gradually erased her doubts. Lunch smoothly turned into conversations full of laughter, memories, and random touches. She began to see Harry not just as a colleague, but as someone she wanted to spend more time with. A few days after the first dinner, Harry suggested meeting again, but this time in a place where they could be alone. They chose a motel outside the city where no one could see them. It was a risky step, but Susan, unexpectedly for herself, agreed. When they entered the room, she felt confused. For the first time in many years, she found herself in a situation where all the usual rules were thrown away. Harry acted with his usual confidence, but without haste. He created a space for her where she could be herself, forget about the role of mother and wife. Their passion flared up instantly, and for Susan, it was a revelation. Sex with Harry turned out to be the best of her life, filled with sensuality and attention to her desires, which she had not experienced for a long time. He was persistent, but attentive, and his every gesture seemed to say that at that moment there was no one for him except her. After their first meeting, Susan felt both empty and exhilarated. She knew she loved her husband and children, but Harry brought out a side of her that she had hidden for a long time. Their romance continued for several more months, filled with secret meetings, short text messages, and stolen moments of passion. Harry knew how to give her what she didn't realize she was missing, a sense of freedom, adventure, and admiration. Their affair lasted a month before Harry achieved his goal of seducing Susan in her own home. It happened on a weekend when Manny was working on an urgent project an hour away from home. Susan sent the children to her mother, citing fatigue, and invited Harry. They spent 2 days having sex, snacking, and occasionally napping. Susan stopped feeling guilty, but was stunned when Manny returned half an hour after Harry left. Manny found out everything. One of his friends happened to see Harry leaving the house and reported it. Arriving home, Manny found Susan changing the bed linen. He took the children from Susan's mother and told her to pack her things. Manny was furious and vowed to take revenge on Harry for his broken family. Harry, realizing the danger, cashed out his savings and left for Seattle. Manny never found him. As a result, he filed for divorce, but a few months later he changed his mind and returned to the family. However, their marriage was never the same again. Manny simply couldn't trust Susan, and nothing could change that. However, they stayed together. In Seattle, Harry got a job selling new luxury cars. He became an instant success in this matter. At the same time, he met several married women, including clients and his boss's wife. Her name was Joan Dillon, and her husband's name was Steve. Harry was patient with Joan, gradually developing their communication. In between, he managed to start affairs with 3 more married women. 2 of them were clients, and the third was the wife of a work colleague. He was always very careful and secretive. Harry took particular pleasure in making love to these women in their marital beds. For example, he slept with a co-worker's wife while he was at an away football game. However, Harry soon cooled his relationship with her to avoid complications. He eventually focused on Joan Dillon. He intensified his efforts ahead of the holidays at a corporate party. Harry invited Joan to a dance, during which he quietly proposed to her. By that time, Joan had long craved intimacy with Harry. They slipped into the parking lot, where they used the back seat of one of the expensive cars. Joan was literally in love with Harry. Their romance continued, and they met once or twice a week in motels. One day, Harry found out that Steve was going to Las Vegas for the weekend and invited Joan to invite him home. She happily agreed. They spent 2 days and 2 nights barely leaving the bedroom. Joan was 10 years older than Harry, but this did not interfere with her passion, and she almost drove Harry to the grave with her temperament. However, Steve, who had long suspected his wife of infidelity, installed recording devices in the house, including the bedroom. On Sunday evening, he listened to the tapes and a scandal broke out. He kicked Joan out of the house and threw away her things. Joan called her friend Helen Jameson, who came to pick her up. While they were driving in the car, Joan called Harry to warn him. But at that moment, Steve's Mercedes rushed past the car. Joan managed to tell Harry to run. Harry slipped away mere minutes before Steve arrived. He, armed with a pistol, walked around the parking lot near Harry's apartment until the police arrived. Steve was arrested, but was soon released on bail. Harry watched the arrest from the balcony of a nearby apartment. After that, he packed his things, got into the Jaguar, and drove off. Steve filed for divorce. During the divorce proceedings, details of Harry's affairs with other married women surfaced. 2 of them are still married, but the husband of a work colleague has finally left his wife. Harry went to San Diego. Harry fell in love with San Diego for its climate. There he again got a job as a used car salesman. He didn't really need the money, since he had managed to accumulate a decent fortune, but he decided to continue working. After living in San Diego for a year, he met Faith Drummond and her husband, Mark. Before he met Faith, he made a promise to himself that he would no longer pursue married women because it had become too risky. However, Faith made him change his mind. Faith and Mark were married for 10 years and had 2 children, John and Vera, who were in elementary school. Faith was a lawyer for a large probate firm. Mark worked as an accountant and ran his business from home. Mark took care of the children more often, picking them up from school. They had a young girl who came to look after the children after school since Mark was busy at that time. Faith was a real beauty, slender, with long blonde hair and brown eyes. Compared to her, Mark did not look so impressive. He was a little shorter than his wife, slightly overweight, with brown hair and brown eyes. However, Mark had hidden virtues. He played amateur league baseball and lifted weights at the IMCA. He looked soft, but was physically strong. In addition, he was attentive to detail. Harry met the couple at a charity event organized by Faith's law firm. Harry was an active participant in this campaign, raising money for the homeless. He developed a successful strategy to raise funds and build an orphanage. Some of the funds collected ended up in his account, but the amount was too small to attract attention. That evening, while dancing with Faith, Harry decided that she would definitely become his. He was polite to Mark, but when dancing with his wife, he held her a little closer than he should have. Harry began his usual method of gentle flattery, and by the end of the evening, Faith was intrigued. Mark noticed this. Harry was lucky enough to have Faith appointed to oversee post-event activities with him shortly after the event. This included processing proceeds and planning a Christmas charity event. They had 2 meetings at the firm's offices, and Harry continued to act cautiously, adding subtle compliments. He asked about Mark, and when he heard that he was working from home, he pretended to be unimpressed. 3 weeks after the event, Harry invited Faith to dinner. She agreed. By then, Faith had already begun to see something attractive in Harry. After this dinner, she unexpectedly thought about Harry as she went to bed. To cope with this confusion, she initiated sex with Mark herself, and everything went fine between them. Faith and Mark had a very harmonious sex life. She was completely satisfied with her husband, and he with her. Their relationship was varied and passionate. That's why Faith was surprised when she found herself thinking about Harry during sex with Mark. Mark noticed this. He didn't complain, but thought about it. The next day, Harry invited Faith to dinner again. She accepted the invitation, and they met for 2 days in a row. On the morning of the second lunch, Faith thought about Harry again, and her thoughts were already frankly unacceptable. This alarmed her, and she decided to cool her relationship with Harry after dinner. Meanwhile, Mark, still concerned about her behavior, decided to make a surprise visit to Faith's office. He arrived around 12:30 and asked the secretary not to alert her in order to make it a surprise. However, the secretary said that Faith had just left for lunch with Harry Baxter. Mark thanked her and left, wary and worried. He drove past several restaurants in an attempt to find her car. Almost in despair, he noticed her car at a traffic light. Only Harry was in the cabin. Faith had originally planned to follow through on her decision to stay away from Harry. They chose a small Greek restaurant 2 miles from her office. She insisted on driving herself to maintain control of the situation. They were discussing a Christmas event when Faith suddenly realized that Harry was holding her hand. She didn't notice how this happened and began to carefully pull her hand away, but Harry only squeezed her fingers tighter. There was a pause in their conversation, and their eyes met. "I want you so much," Harry said. Faith felt her heart beat faster. "We can't have this kind of relationship, Harry," Faith said, but she didn't remove her hand. She felt her body respond to his touch. "I'm sure you want me as much as I want you. We can be together without ruining your life. You may be right, but this is too much of a risk for me." "I might want to take the risk, but I won't." Faith looked intently into Harry's blue eyes. "Well, a man can only try," Harry said with a smile. He called the waiter over, asked for the bill, and placed his card on the tray when it arrived. He then looked back at Faith. She sat with her eyes down on the table. She seemed lost in thought, almost as if she was about to cry. "Faith, I didn't mean to upset you. Sorry, I just have strong feelings for you." Faith looked at Harry and smiled slightly. "You are a real tempter, Harry. I don't understand how it got this far." "How far? Are we just holding hands?" "You're right. Not that far. Let's just forget about what I said. Let's continue planning the event. I hope I haven't ruined our working relationship." "No, everything is fine. Let's go back. I need to work." They returned to Faith's office. She parked in her spot and walked Harry to his car. "I'll contact you as soon as I confirm the details of the venue," said Harry. "Okay," she answered and looked at him. Harry held out his hand for a handshake, which she found odd, so she gave him a small hug and thanked him for lunch. She then went to the office, and Harry got into his Mazda Miata and drove off. Harry realized how far he had come with Faith. Mark, who was following their car, saw this exchange. He thought Harry just wanted to shake her hand, but it was Faith who wanted to hug him. He became alarmed. Mark returned home. He tried to concentrate on his work, but thoughts of Faith and Harry haunted him. There was no obvious reason for him to worry, but the anxiety was strong. He decided to do a little investigation. Mark checked Harry Baxter's name through several databases. There wasn't much information on Google, mostly articles about the sale of Harry's 3 car dealerships. He then found Harry's address, phone number, and previous addresses in Seattle and Pittsburgh. Harry seemed to move frequently. Finally, Mark entered his name into the court database. Harry's name comes up in a Seattle divorce case, Dillon versus Dillon. That's how he got Steve Dillon's name and contact information. Faith was shocked by her lunch with Harry. It seemed to her that she was standing on the edge of a cliff and was tempted to jump to feel the pleasant feeling of free fall. This analogy strengthened her resolve to keep her distance from Harry. She understood that if she came too close, she would jump. Mark was wondering what to do. He called Steve Dillon, who told him about Harry's activities in Seattle, as well as about his previous affairs. Steve found out about this during the divorce proceedings. Mark also contacted Manny Bordon, but he did not want to discuss his wife's affair with Harry. The memories were too painful. However, Manny warned that Harry is a cunning and dangerous man who will sooner or later get his way. Mark wasn't sure if he should show Faith the information he'd collected right away. He understood that in this way he would show her his mistrust. He decided to carefully ask her about Harry. When Faith returned home, they ordered pizza and beer to have dinner together. Over dinner, Mark started a conversation. "I'm sorry I wasn't there when you came," Faith said. "I had lunch with Harry Baxter." "What's wrong with this guy? Do you see him often?" "Not so often. I'm doing a charity project, and we started planning a holiday event. Harry is a great salesman and made the last event a real success." Faith realized that Mark was worried about her interactions with Harry. His tone was a little tense. She decided not to mention the first dinner and the hand-holding episode. "I don't like this guy, Faith. Something about him is alarming. I think you should stay away from him." "Oh, Mark, Harry did such a great job. He is essentially a good person, but I won't need to see him too much until the next event at the end of the year." Faith tried to look sincere. Mark didn't believe it. It seemed to him that she was not telling him anything. "Faith, maybe he really is a good guy. Maybe he does a lot of good. But he also tries to sleep with you. You understand this, right? I understand that he finds me attractive. Just be careful around him. He's not at all harmless. If you spend too much time with him, he will be able to get his way. And that would be a real shame, wouldn't it?" Faith turned slightly pale. She was surprised at how accurately Mark assessed Harry. She even blushed slightly, which Mark also noticed. "I will be extremely careful. In fact, as I said, I won't need to see him much." "Okay," Mark said, ending the conversation. But now he was on his guard. That blush told him more than Faith's words. As for Harry, he realized that he needed to step back for a while. He was a patient man and was willing to do something else until the right moment came to win Faith. He left her a message when he found the venue for the holiday event, but then didn't call her for a month. Faith took this message. She took the hint from Mark and Harry. This annoyed her a little, but she threw herself into her new job and soon stopped thinking about it. Her life with Mark returned to its usual rhythm. They still had a regular sex life. However, from time to time, while having sex with Mark, Faith still thought about Harry. Mark was not relieved that Harry had temporarily disappeared. He began to discreetly watch Harry. Over the next 2 months, Mark studied his lifestyle. It turned out that Harry was quite predictable on weekdays. In the morning, he went to the gym, then to work, and in the evening he ran. He had 2 routes to run. One ran through the park near his apartment, and the other along a country road returning to the city. This second route was about 10 miles long, and Harry only ran it once every 2 or 3 weeks. Mark learned the first route while running behind Harry. He figured out the second route by following him in a car. Mark was able to retrace the last few miles of Harry's journey on foot and later reconstructed the entire route. Harry always found company on weekends. Sometimes it was one woman on Friday and another on Saturday. Mark managed to find out the names of some of them. 2 of them turned out to be married. Mark collected all his observations piece by piece over several months and stored this information for possible future use. When September arrived, Faith knew she would have to contact Harry again as a charity ball was scheduled for mid-December at the Hilton Hotel downtown. She emailed Harry with her plans and asked her boss to assign her an assistant to organize. She was assigned William "Billy" Kutchner, a paralegal who was very detail-oriented. Faith arranged a meeting in the office between herself, Harry, and Billy. She didn't say anything to Mark about this, deciding that there was no point in disturbing him again. The meeting was successful. Harry and Billy hit it off, and the 3 spent 2 hours discussing plans and details. Faith and Billy were to deal with hotel cooperation, catering, and other organizational issues, while Harry took over the sale of tickets to companies, firms, and organizations. It was decided that the gala ball would be a dinner followed by a dance party. Billy made an agreement with a music group that performed covers of rock hits from the 50s and 60s. Everything went smoothly until the end of October. Harry managed to enlist the support of many organizations who willingly purchased tickets. He also came up with a scheme whereby companies that bought enough tickets would receive widespread public praise for their generosity. Radio advertisements and television advertisements were placed. Shortly before Halloween, Mark asked Faith about the upcoming event, and at the same time asked how things were going with her and Harry. They sat on the terrace after dinner. "Well, Mark, everything is going great," Faith answered. "Harry exceeded all expectations. Tickets are already sold out. They are becoming a real shortage. And you spend more time with him?" "A little more. But we have Billy Kutchner who helps, and he has the most contact with Harry. I know you're worried about Harry. So far, so good. But it looks like you'll have to see him more often soon." "Yes, I will need to participate in several meetings as the event approaches. Harry is coming up with new ways to raise funds during the ball itself, not just through tickets. Just remember what I said before. I don't think you were completely honest with me back then. I want you to let me know when you're going out with him. Okay, I can do it, but I think you just don't trust me." "I don't trust Harry, and next to him, I have doubts about you too. Mark, all meetings will take place in the office, and Billy will always be there. No time alone with Harry, no lunches." "Fine, fine." Faith and Harry never discussed his confession during their first lunch. However, even in Billy's presence, Harry continued his campaign to seduce Faith. Light touches, smiles, general jokes. Harry understood why Billy was involved in the project and why all the meetings were held in the office. It was a challenge for him. But deep down, he knew that Faith herself had orchestrated it this way because she was afraid of losing control if she was left alone with him. Meanwhile, Mark drove to a hardware store on the other side of town and bought several tools: a shovel, a pickaxe, and a large tarp. He hid all this in the attic above the garage. He also purchased an old used pickup truck with a canopy, paying for it in cash. The car was not registered, and Mark left it parked outside the city in a trailer park. He returned home on his bike, telling Faith he was going to do more cycling to get in shape. It was true, he really was going to ride more. Later, Mark managed to get a stun gun through an acquaintance connected with the police. Mark hoped he wouldn't have to use the weapon. Faith and Harry continued to prepare for the charity ball until November. However, not all issues could be resolved in the office. I had to go to meetings with representatives of the hotel, catering, and recruitment agency. Initially, the three of them drove together, but Billy had other responsibilities, and just before Thanksgiving, Faith found herself in the same car with Harry on the way to a meeting at the hotel. There would be a large meeting of all participants to approve the decoration plan, menu, and distribution of responsibilities. There was less than a month left before the event. Over the past few weeks, Faith had grown to trust Harry more. He continued to work on her position, but she did not see it. It seemed to her that Harry had truly become her friend. Now that he was driving her to the meeting, Harry decided it was time to move on. "Faith, I want to thank you for all the work you put into this project," Harry began, glancing at her as they drove. "I know you had doubts about me. I tried to dispel them, and I hope that I succeeded." "Well, Harry, I still have some questions. I can't lie about this. That's why you avoided being alone with me all this time. I understand that, and frankly, it's even a little flattering." "What do you mean, flattering?" She stopped mid-sentence, realizing what he meant. "You don't trust yourself around me. And to tell you the truth, I still feel the same way I did then." Faith fell silent and turned away. She felt attracted to Harry, perhaps even more so than before, as their interactions became more frequent. She thought about Harry often, even when she was having sex with Mark. These thoughts worried her, but also excited her. "Harry, I don't want to mislead you. I will not have sexual relations with you. Never." "We've arrived," Harry said as he pulled into the hotel parking lot. "It's time for us to get into a working mood." The meeting was very successful. The plans for decorating the hall, the menu, and the distribution of responsibilities were finally approved. It lasted more than 2.5 hours. When it was all over, Faith suddenly realized that she and Harry were left alone in the room. She froze, not knowing where to look. Is something wrong, Faith? I thought the meeting went well. Yes, everything went fine, she replied, smiling faintly at Harry. Thank you. How about we celebrate with a little drink, somewhere nearby? No, Harry, I can't allow that. Mark won't understand this. Perhaps after the event, we can celebrate somehow. Okay, I'll remember that, Faith. Okay, time to move. Are you home or to the office? Home. I don't think I'll get anything done at the office today. Harry drove Faith back to the office parking lot. He quickly got out of the car to open the door for her. As she climbed out, Harry touched her lightly, barely noticeable. He walked her to her car. It was already 5:30, and it was dark outside. Faith pressed the button on the key fob to open the door, and Harry, gallant as ever, swung it open. As she got into the car, her thigh lightly brushed against Harry's. Then she turned around and smiled at him. It was a smile to show that she did it on purpose. Harry gave her the same smile and closed the door. He watched her drive away. Mark at this time was sitting in his car at the other end of the parking lot and watching the scene. He didn't like what he saw at all. He returned home right after Faith, told her that I stopped by on business. He actually had drawing sheets and pencils with him, so she didn't suspect anything. Over dinner, Mark asked Faith about her day. We held a big meeting at the hotel to approve all the details for the ball. Everything went great. I think it will be a real success. Great. Who was there? Representatives of hotels, catering, recruitment agencies, decorators. Everyone worked together. We even decided to hold a lottery to raise more funds. What kind of lottery? What will the prize be? I don't know yet. It's at Harry's discretion. How is Harry doing? Are you still avoiding him like I asked? Yes, I'm trying. But today he drove me to the meeting and back. Sorry, it just didn't make sense to drive 2 cars. He behaved perfectly. There's nothing to worry about. Mark was irritated by her explanation. Her way of speaking seemed a little suspicious to him, as if she was hiding something. Understood. But Faith, I want you to understand that Harry is a very experienced man, and he is doing everything he can to seduce you. No, Mark, he was absolutely polite. You're just paranoid. After dinner, they put the children to bed. Mark then went to his office and took out the material he had prepared for Faith. It was detailed information about Harry's affairs with married women, broken marriages, divorces, and his moves from city to city. Everything was documented. He gave the folder to Faith. Please read this completely before you say anything. Faith began to read. Her face turned red when she realized what was going on. Reading took no more than 10 minutes. Oh my God, she whispered. I just never had any trust in this man, Faith. So I decided to find out what kind of person he was. You're not the first married woman he's tried to seduce. Not even 10th. Who knows how many more there are that we don't even know about. Mark, I still have to work with this person. But now I definitely won't succumb to his charms after everything I've learned. Maybe I was tempted before. He is truly a master of seduction. But this won't happen anymore. I'm glad to hear it. However, please avoid contact with him as much as possible. Certainly. Fine. Soon after, they made love. When they finished, Mark fell asleep. Faith was awake. She thought for a long time that, despite what she now knew about Harry, her desire tonight was connected with him. Moreover, the knowledge that he was a master of seduction only intensified her attraction. The next morning, Faith was in a great mood as she got ready for work. Mark too, but he began to think about the previous evening. His revelation of Harry seemed to work for Faith. But then why was she so passionate in bed? As he thought about it, he realized that his words about Harry were actually letting Faith know that Harry was a sexy Superman. Mark was annoyed. He was sure that Faith was now even more willing to let Harry seduce her. She might even make the first move. It was stupid of him. Usually such insights are accompanied by doubts, but this time Mark had no doubts. It was the only way to explain everything. Mark left the house around noon with a shovel and hoe. He went to the park near Harry's house. Walking deep into the shady trees, he dug a large, rather deep hole. When he was finished, he camouflaged it with branches and put up a red warning stake. After that, he returned home. At work, Faith was distracted. She realized that she was becoming more and more susceptible to Harry's advances. She found it difficult to suppress her desires whenever she thought about him. It didn't matter to her that he was a fraud and some kind of strange person. On the contrary, it only fueled her interest. In the afternoon, Harry called Faith to clarify the details of the charity raffle. He decided to play with a new electric car, of course, not a Tesla. He managed to persuade the owner of a Chevrolet dealership to provide a car, a Chevy Volt, which was not selling well. The owner agreed because he expected to receive a lot of positive feedback for such a donation. That's what Harry said. Faith was warm when Harry called. He immediately felt that something had changed with her. After discussing the details of the prank, Faith asked if she could see the car. Certainly. When do you want to do it? Maybe tomorrow at lunch. Great. I'll pick you up at noon. Amazing. Faith looked forward to the meeting with enthusiasm. She wondered if Harry would be lucky enough to see the car first and then have dinner, or vice versa. Harry wondered what could have changed Faith's behavior. He felt he had to be ready to take their relationship to the next level. As the day progressed, Faith began to have serious doubts about her impulsive initiative. She had a family, and she knew Mark would be keeping a close eye on her relationship with Harry. The thought that she might lose Mark scared her. When she returned home, Mark noticed that she had been sitting in the car for a long time. He understood that she was hesitating. Faith got out of the car and entered the house. Mark greeted her with a smile. The children ran up to their mother, rejoicing at her return. She hugged them and asked them about their day. John said that he got an excellent score on his history test, and Vera boasted that she had lunch with the teacher. Faith praised them both, asked for details, and then sent them back to their activities. "How was your day?" she asked Mark. "I had a pretty productive day." "Well, we will now have a drawing for a car at a charity ball. And of course, we got it for free. This is Volt. Harry is simply a master at these things." "Yes, but these cars don't sell well. Anyway, I'm sure it will bring in a lot of money." "I think so too. What's for dinner? Have you prepared anything?" Mark smiled. "Today we will have grilled brats and salad. Therefore, there are no smells of delicious food. If you're hungry, I'll cook everything now." "Sounds great. I'm really hungry." Faith went upstairs to change while Mark started preparing dinner. During dinner, the conversation was mostly about the children's upcoming final soccer games. Both teams that John and Vera played for reached the finals, but the games took place at the same time in different places. It was decided that Faith would go with John and Mark would go with Vera. Everyone had to record matches on video. After the kids went to bed, Faith settled down on the couch with a book. Mark spent some time in his office and then went down to his wife. "Do you still see Harry often? The ball is already very close." Mark is used to asking such questions. "Yes, tomorrow we'll go see the Volt and take some pictures for advertising. I hope the color will be good." Mark frowned. "We? Who exactly?" "Harry and I. We need to get these shots quickly so we can send out promotional materials." "And I would imagine that the dealer could just send you photos. Why should you two go?" "Mark, I think Harry just wants to show how he was able to get the car for free." "I think Harry wants to get you, and it looks like you're letting him. Last night, when I told you about him, your reaction was not at all what I expected." When Mark said this, Faith looked down and blushed. He came closer and hugged her tightly. "Don't," he said, lifting her chin and looking her straight in the eyes. "Just don't do it. You'll regret this." And he does too. "Mark, I don't know." Faith began to stutter, realizing that she would not be able to deceive her husband. She felt him penetrate her thoughts. This made her angry. "Mark, I won't let you bully me. I'm not going to bed with Harry. You take on too much." No, I'm not too much. I'm trying to save our family, and I think you should too. Our family is going to be okay, Faith said, almost crying. She tried to escape from Mark's embrace, but he did not let her go. Don't destroy us, Faith. We are your family. Don't ruin it. Stay away from this man. Mark let her go and went upstairs. He brushed his teeth and went to bed. Faith couldn't believe it had gone this far. Her husband seemed to read her thoughts, and he was not wrong. Everything they talked about was based on the assumption that Faith had decided to have a relationship with Harry, and it was true. She knew that she could easily persuade Harry to take her to his place under the pretext of lunch. But Mark prevented this. She was aware that if she allowed Harry to take over her, Mark would somehow find out about it, and he won't stand for it. She didn't know what exactly he would do, but she had no doubt that the consequences would be severe. Faith decided to cancel her trip to the dealer with Harry. She sent him a message saying no, then turned off her phone and went upstairs. Mark was reading a book in bed when Faith came into the bedroom after getting ready for bed. I canceled my meeting with Harry for tomorrow. I'm sorry I even thought about it. I won't let it affect me, I promise. Fine. I'm glad to hear that. I expected that you might give me an ultimatum. No, I would never do that. They lay down hugging each other, but that night they had no intimacy. Over the next few days, Mark watched Faith closely. He saw no signs that she was dating Harry. She knew he was watching and tried to avoid any suspicious actions. Despite the belief that Faith was keeping Harry at a distance, Mark remained vigilant. One day, he drove to a remote spot on Harry's long route, where he found a hidden spot behind some trees and dug another hole similar to the first. Faith was busy getting ready for the ball. She only kept in touch with Harry for work purposes, mostly through email and infrequently. Harry, in turn, did not understand what had happened. He was sure that Faith was ready for intimacy when she made the appointment at the car dealership, but something changed when she returned home. Harry decided it was best to wait until Faith herself re-established contact. He knew that preparations for the ball would force her to turn to him. And Faith did find the need to talk to Harry about work matters. Time was passing, and she didn't want to face any unresolved crises at the last minute. She called him to discuss decorations, music, and staff management. Harry outlined the plan for the prank. Faith praised him, noting that he had thought through every detail. Harry then decided to address the topic that was in the air. Faith, when we got together for lunch last week, I thought we were finally going to take it to the next level. What happened? Harry, I think we should leave it at that. I already told you how much you tempt me. But Mark, he's incredibly insightful. He will immediately understand if something happens. It's like magic. It seems that if it weren't for Mark, something would have already happened to us. I know you want it. You know that I want it. Why don't you tell Mark what you want? Because it would ruin our relationship. It should be obvious to you. Why should this destroy them? A woman can satisfy more than one man, especially someone like you. Why does Mark have to be the only one? Tell him you want a freedom pass. I can't do this. He'll kick me out right away. If he does that, that's his problem. I would let you live with me. Imagine what we could do together. No, Harry. I love him, and I don't want to hurt him, even if in some way I want you. Well, let me know if you change your mind. In the meantime, where are we and the staff for the ball? For the next week, Faith and Harry communicated only about business. Mark did not see anything suspicious in her behavior. They made plans. They agreed to leave the children with Faith's parents and go to the ball. A meeting was scheduled for the Friday before the ball at the hotel, where Faith and Harry and their staff discussed the final preparations and checked everything down to the smallest detail. When the meeting ended, Harry walked Faith to her car. Taking her hand, he unexpectedly hugged her. Faith was caught off guard, but didn't pull away. Harry put his hand on the back of her head and kissed her. Faith was shocked at first, but then kissed her back. Tomorrow at the ball, I will take you. A real ball at a ball. Don't wear panties. he whispered in her ear. Faith whispered, stunned, "Oh, oh." Harry let her go and went to his car. Faith got into her car, shocked, and just sat there, watching Harry drive away. That evening, Mark noticed that Faith was not her usual self. She seemed quiet and thoughtful. He assumed it was out of excitement for the charity ball that was to take place the next day, but he also sensed that there was something more behind her behavior. As they got ready for bed, Mark walked over to Faith, put his arm around her, and gently pulled her towards him. After their intimacy, they lay next to each other, catching their breath. But Mark already knew the truth. Something happened again between Faith and Harry. "It's all because of Harry, right? What's happened?" he whispered. Faith froze, realizing that there was no point in hiding. She answered with a bowed head. "He kissed me. I didn't expect this. But I kissed him back. Then he left." "Faith, tomorrow is a big day. I'll be with you all evening, and I don't want any problems with Harry. But if I see something, I will make it clear to everyone how I feel about it. Mark, I promise I will behave. After the ball, I will step away from all matters with Harry, and someone else will take care of the final issues. I won't be around him anymore." "Fine. I think you understand this, but I still don't trust you. I'll keep an eye on you tomorrow." And rightly so. The next morning they woke up, had breakfast, and went about their business. Both returned home in time to get ready for the ball. Faith took a long time to get ready. She carefully applied makeup and styled her hair. Her dress was elegant, with a low back that reached almost to her waist. The skirt of the dress reached to her knees, and she knew that it would flutter beautifully as she danced. She wore high heels that matched her dress. But before leaving the room, Faith took off her panties. She told herself that nothing would happen, but knew that if the opportunity presented itself, she would not be able to resist. Her thoughts raced between her fear of Mark and her inner attraction to Harry. Mark, who noticed all the details, praised her choice of dress. They called a taxi to take them to the hotel where the ball was being held. The children stayed with Faith's parents, and Mark pre-booked a hotel room, hoping to hold their own after-party there. Harry also took a room at the same hotel. He was accompanied by his neighbor, Cindy, a beautiful and free-spirited woman who adored Harry and his confidence. Before they left for the ball, Harry warned her that he hoped to end up with another woman. Cindy understood and took it with interest. She was used to Harry's demeanor and looked forward to watching his actions. Charity ball began, and the intensity of passions only increased. Faith and Mark arrived at the hotel around 7 p.m. They left their travel bags in the room. By that time, the hotel was already in full swing. They entered the ballroom and chatted with Faith's colleagues. Mark knew that Harry Baxter would be here, and he looked out for him carefully. He grabbed a glass of wine for himself and one for Faith. When he returned from the bar, Harry and a beautiful young woman were talking to his wife. Mark came up. "Here's your wine, Faith." "Hello, Mr. Baxter. How are you?" "Thanks. Everything is fine. And this is a charming young lady, Cindy, my companion for this evening." Mark recognized Cindy Mason. This woman had been visiting Harry often lately. In fact, Mark hadn't seen any other women come to Harry for months, although he checked every 2 weeks or so. "Nice to meet you, Cindy. I'm Mark, Faith's husband. These two really worked hard to make this evening a success. It seems they have succeeded." Yes, Harry spent a lot of time doing this, perhaps even too much. But charity will benefit. "Did Faith leave you alone like Harry left me?" The question was quite provocative. Mark wondered if Cindy was joking or serious. He laughed. "I hope I didn't completely leave it. But after tonight, I think I'll see her more often." The gong rang and Harry interjected. "It's time to take your seats." Faith and Harry led them to the 8-person table closest to the stage. They knew where to go. There were cards with names on the table. Harry found himself between Faith and Cindy, and Mark was on his wife's other side. When everyone was seated, the presenter began the program. The waiters were already serving appetizers. Several representatives of the charity were on stage and were served first. After dinner, they would listen to a speech by the director of the Help the Homeless Foundation, and then they would begin dancing to live music. Around 11 p.m., Harry was scheduled to announce the winner of the Chevy Volt giveaway. Mark talked to Faith for a bit, and then she turned to Harry, and they began discussing the details of the program. Harry leaned closer to Faith than he should have. Mark noticed this. When the salad arrived, the waiter asked what drinks they would order. Everyone asked for wine. After the main course, as the plates began to be cleared, Mark saw that the seat next to Cindy had become vacant and moved to sit there. "Looks like we're in the same boat, Cindy." Faith and Harry left us alone. "How are things going with you and Harry?" he asked. "You know, Mark, this is an open question. I spend 3 or 4 nights a week with him, and this has been the case for more than 6 months. But it seems to me that we will not be a couple for long. Harry is not one to settle down. You are a very beautiful young woman. You probably have a lot of options. Why not give him an ultimatum? Either he is with you or he is not." Cindy blushed slightly. "Sex. It's simple. I love it, and Harry is simply the best at it." Mark frowned as he looked at Faith, who was still talking to Harry. "I see," he answered briefly. "You know, Mark, I've been thinking about Harry and Faith. They look close when I see them together. Do you have an open marriage? Or are you worried?" "I'm worried." At this point, dessert was served, and Mark returned to his place. When dessert was served, Mark returned to his seat. A band came on stage and played a Buddy Holly song. Mark turned to Faith. "Shall we dance?" "With pleasure." They headed to the dance floor, which was quite far from their table. Harry and Cindy followed them. Mark was an excellent dancer, while Faith was a mediocre dancer. But next to him, she seemed to blossom. Her movements became more confident and graceful. They started with a jitterbug. Mark watched Harry and Cindy carefully. Harry danced uncertainty, without much inspiration, but Cindy looked great. She was spinning, smiling, her movements were light and graceful. Then came another fast rock and roll number. Mark and Faith performed a version of Boogaloo. Harry simply moved to the music while Cindy danced around him, adding sensuality to her movements. The next tune was slow. Faith pressed herself close to Mark and wrapped her arms around his neck. "Thanks for talking to Cindy while Harry and I worked on the final details," she said. "My pleasure. She is very interesting and frank and also sexy. You like her, right? By the way, she and Harry rented a room here for the night. So we can all have fun and dance," Mark replied, keeping an impassive expression on his face. Faith didn't catch his sarcasm. "Exactly. It's a big party for all of us." "We'll see how everything turns out," Mark remarked restrainedly. He began to suspect that Harry, Faith, and Cindy might have planned something for the evening in advance. He decided not to drink any more and to be on guard. After a slow dance, all four returned to the table. Harry ordered a bottle of champagne. He opened it and poured it into glasses. Mark sipped his wine, and Faith quickly drank hers. Her face was flushed, and she was talking animatedly. When the next song came on, she grabbed Harry's hand. "Come on, Harry, let's dance." Harry shrugged, glanced at Mark, and followed Faith onto the dance floor. Mark looked at Cindy. "You dance great. Maybe we can try it together." "I wish I could. Harry is good at many things, but not at dancing." Mark took her hand and led her out onto the dance floor. After the energetic dance, the jitterbug tune began. Mark noticed Harry and Faith dancing in the far corner of the room, too close to each other. He turned to Cindy, abruptly pulled her into a deep bend, and then spun her around. She looked great, her movements were confident, and her technique was impeccable. People started applauding. Their dance ended with thunderous applause. At this time, Harry leaned towards Faith and quietly asked, "Did you follow my advice about the panties?" "Yes, I did," Faith answered, without any embarrassment. She was too excited by Harry's presence. However, they were distracted by the loud applause caused by Mark and Cindy dancing. As the next tune became fast again, Mark and Cindy began to move closer to each other. Cindy wrapped her arms around Mark, and he wrapped his arms around her back. Their dance became more and more explicit. The crowd watched them in delight. Harry and Faith were also in the audience. Faith was amazed that Mark could dance like that, and so openly in front of everyone. When the song ended, the audience burst into applause. Mark and Cindy bowed and returned to the table. Harry and Faith followed them. Harry, sitting down at the table, joked, "Wow, you two really rocked it. I thought you were going to do it right there." "Oh, Harry," Cindy cooed, "Mark and I just clicked perfectly." "I'll tell you, that's for sure," Faith interjected. Her face was flushed. She thought that maybe today she would have a chance with Harry if Mark wanted to be with Cindy. This thought had been spinning in her head for a long time. The four finished their champagne. Mark barely drank again, but continued to analyze what might happen when they all returned to the fourth floor. When the champagne ran out, the host announced for Harry to take the stage. Harry took an envelope from his pocket and confidently walked up to the podium. And now the moment we've all been waiting for. Today's grand prize winner is a Chevrolet Volt, courtesy of Pricer Chevy. He opened the envelope and read the name. And the winner is Cheryl Wilson. An enthusiastic scream was heard from the dance floor, and a young blonde woman in her 20s ran onto the stage. Harry handed her the car keys, and she hugged him tightly. He held it a little longer than expected. He then handed her the keys. "The car is parked right at the entrance. Mr. Wright will show it to you. Friends, this drawing raised $24,000 for the homeless fund. Let's thank Joe Pricer for his generous donation." Harry walked off the stage and returned to his group. The band started playing "Don't Be Cruel." Mark extended his hand to Faith. "Shall we dance?" Faith hesitated for a moment, but still took his hand. They went out onto the dance floor. During the dance, Mark asked, "Faith, would you like to spend the night with Harry?" "Would you like to go with Cindy?" She answered the question with a question. "I would like to, but this won't happen. I think you and Harry planned this evening." "No. Well, he did mention it, but you and Cindy, your dancing, made it real. It could happen. Everyone would love it." The music changed to 16 Candles. Harry walked up to Mark and, with a light touch, asked him to step back. Mark gave way and turned to Cindy. She hugged his neck and pressed her whole body against him. Mark felt her movements completely synchronize with his. He pulled her closer, feeling her warmth. When the song ended, he kissed her quickly and softly. They moved away from each other a little. Harry and Faith stood nearby. Harry said, "It's time to go upstairs." The four slowly walked towards the elevator. Faith held Harry's arm. Cindy and Mark walked side by side. When the elevator doors opened, it was full, but they managed to get in. People were pressed against each other. The elevator stopped on the third floor. The two walked out, freeing up some space. They got out on the fourth floor. The corridor was quiet and dark. Mark went to door 412, inserted the card into the lock, and opened the door. He stepped back to let Cindy through. She took his hand and entered the room. The door closed. Faith froze. She couldn't believe that Mark would just leave her so that Harry could take his place. Harry took her hand, led her to door 416, and, without opening it, turned her towards him. He reached out to her and kissed her. Harry stopped only when he heard a passing woman say sarcastically, "Get yourself a room." He grinned and opened the door. Faith walked in, and Harry followed her. The door closed. As soon as the door closed behind them, Harry pulled Faith towards him, hugging her softly but firmly. She was still stunned by the kiss, her breathing heavy. "I wanted you from the moment I first saw you," she said, looking him straight in the eyes. "Now you got me," he answered with a smile. Harry began to unfasten the clasp on her dress, which was at the neck. A slight movement, and the fabric slid down, revealing her back. One more movement, and the dress fell to her hips, then to her feet. Faith stood in front of him, wearing only high heels, completely naked. "You're absolutely amazing, Faith," said Harry, undressing himself. Meanwhile, in room 412, Mark and Cindy stood looking at each other. "Well," Cindy said, approaching him, It looks like you and I are left alone. I didn't think you'd actually let her go with him, Mark, but I'm glad you did it. Me too, he replied, pulling her towards him. They kissed again. As expected, morning arrived for both couples. Harry and Faith woke up with their backs to each other. Harry was the first to stir, then Faith woke up. They got up and went to brush their teeth. Faith used Harry's brush since her own was left in room 412. They looked at each other. It was 7:30 am, and they went back to bed. Mark and Cindy woke up at the same time. For some time, they simply looked at each other. Wow, I've never experienced anything like this in my life last night, Cindy said, putting all sincerity into her words. Me too. I wonder how many times we could repeat this. If it's the same every time, it changes everything for me. Well, let's see, yeah, she leaned towards him. Half an hour later, they both got out of bed. They brushed their teeth again with the same brush and showered together, washing each other gently, barely speaking. The morning turned out to be as wonderful as the night. It's time for breakfast. But first we need to exchange things with Faith, Cindy said. I'll write to her. Mark sent Faith a message warning her that he needed to pick up Cindy's things and leave her bag. He will arrive in 10 minutes. Mark knocked on the door to room 416. Faith, dressed in a hotel robe, answered. She smiled at Mark. He handed her the bag and took Cindy's things. Why don't we all meet for breakfast in 45 minutes downstairs in the lounge? Mark suggested. Faith called out, Harry, is breakfast with them in 45 minutes? Down. Sounds good, Harry replied from the bathroom. He came out wearing only boxers. Mark glanced at him, noting how good he looked. He wondered how Harry and Faith had spent the night. Both looked satisfied. Mark waved and closed the door. Faith thought Mark looked thoughtful. She figured he might be worried that after the night with Harry, she might not want him anymore. In fact, Mark was pensive for another reason. He realized that he had fallen in love with Cindy, and perhaps she felt the same. Mark decided to discuss this with Cindy before breakfast. He handed her the travel bag, and she went to the bathroom. Soon she came out in shorts, a t-shirt, and sandals. Mark was dressed the same way, just in different sizes. Cindy, this may not be the best time, but since I'm having breakfast with my wife and your lover, I have to say, I fell in love with you last night on the dance floor, and everything that happened after only strengthened this feeling. I know, I have the same thing, but I don't know what to do about it. I was going to not tell you anything, but since you spoke first. You know, Faith and I need to get home. It's Christmas Tuesday. We have big plans. The children are on vacation and need to be picked up from her mom's house today. Maybe we shouldn't talk about this for now. Let everything settle down until Christmas. Then we'll discuss. Fine, but my feelings won't change. Mine too, I think. Let's take our time. I'm going to see my mom in Orange for Christmas. Many nephews and nieces. Fun for an old maid like me. Mark laughed. When they arrived at the lounge where the breakfast meeting was to take place, Faith and Harry were already waiting for them. They took a table, and the atmosphere was a little tense. Mark was still under the impression of the recent event, feeling the remnants of her lipstick on his body. It made him nervous but excited at the same time. The coffee was served, and he wondered if anyone would notice the way he was looking at Cindy. Harry spoke first. Well, I hope everyone had a good time last night. I hope there are no hard feelings left. Cindy smiled and replied, As for me and Mark, yes, there were some strong feelings. The joke calmed the situation. Everyone laughed, although Faith's laugh was a little more forced. The waitress came over to take the order. Everyone chose hearty breakfasts. Mark ordered a traditional English breakfast with 2 eggs. His hunger was almost insatiable. Cindy's joke relieved some of the tension. Harry was in high spirits. Cindy and Mark were still happy because of their special bond. But Faith began to feel her euphoria from the night with Harry gradually fade away. She watched the interaction between Mark and Cindy, which became increasingly obvious. Breakfast ended and the couples headed to their cars. Harry and Cindy were the first to leave. When Mark opened the car door for Faith, she turned to kiss him on the lips. But Mark, remaining restrained, simply patted her on the head and helped her into the car. On the way home, Faith noticed a change in his behavior. She began to feel anxious about her night with Harry and Mark's reaction to what was happening. Harry, meanwhile, asked Cindy how her night with Mark went. He did not yet fully realize that something special had happened between them. "Mark and I were like one," she replied. "How are things going with you and Faith?" Faith was magnificent. "Great. I hope it was worth it for her." Harry frowned. "What does it mean?" "Mark now has nothing to show her. He chose me instead of his wife." "Are you okay with possibly ruining their marriage?" "Usually I would feel guilty, but this time I don't. If they break up, I'll take Mark for myself. He's great." Harry clenched his jaw. He knew he was losing Cindy. Harry squeezed the steering wheel, trying not to show his irritation. "They have children, Cindy. What about us?" Cindy grinned. "Harry, what are you talking about? I want to get married, start a family. And you will never do this, not with me or with anyone else." Harry frowned. "So you want me to take you home?" "Yes, it is. Sorry, Harry. Let's see what happens after the holidays. I'm not saying I'm throwing you out of my life. Sex with you helps keep my sanity." Harry grinned, but inside he was seething. "But if you get a chance with Mark, will you leave me?" "Without a doubt." Harry drove Cindy to her house and kissed her on the cheek, but inside he felt empty. He hoped that she would invite him to spend Christmas with her, but this did not happen. Now he would have to find a replacement, and he knew that no one could compare to Cindy. This realization depressed him. When Harry returned home, he felt defeated for the first time in a long time. His ego was crushed by the thought that Mark, whom he considered ordinary, could win the woman who had been by his side for a long time. Meanwhile, Mark and Faith arrived home. They had 2 hours before they had to pick up the children from Faith's mother. Faith tried to start a conversation. She made coffee, walked up to Mark, and hugged him. Her goal was to seduce him in order to restore their connection. "Mark, why don't you bring me back after my night with Harry? Make me yours again." She pressed herself against him, trying to elicit a response. "No." Her eyes widened. "Why? Are we done? Or do you need time? What's the matter? Are you going to sleep with Harry again?" Faith turned away without answering. Mark sighed. "Here is my answer. I want to know, have you ever had sex with me that was the same as you did with Harry?" Faith swallowed and answered quietly. "No. Well, not in the sense of just sex, but there is love with you." She immediately realized that this was a mistake. "Faith, I'm going to invite Cindy to dinner. I want to get to know her better, not just in bed. You can continue to see Harry, but don't take him to this house. If I found out that he was here, there would be serious consequences. It has its place, use it." Faith felt her heart clench. "Mark, do you really mind if I sleep with Harry?" Her voice trembled. Mark answered coldly. "I objected. Very much. But you did it anyway. You would have done it anyway, even if I had never met Cindy. You say it was the best sex of your life. Why don't you continue?" Faith felt anger building inside her. She thought Mark was being unfair. After all, he himself chose Cindy instead of her on the night of the ball. "Well, keep getting to know Cindy better. And while you're at it, Harry will be with me as soon as I can arrange it," Faith said and turned away. Mark stood up, took a pillow, and went to the sofa in his office. At that moment, he realized that their marriage was over. Faith cried herself to sleep. Mark called Cindy the next morning, Boxing Day. She was glad to hear him so soon. He invited her to dinner on Friday. "Why don't you just come to me? I want us to have a real date where we can talk. If I come to you, we probably won't talk too much. You know almost nothing about me, just like I know about you. I think before we get married, I need to know about your work, family. You understand." "Let's get married then," she laughed. "Okay, Pick me up at 7, 12 Greentree Street, apartment 4. How should I dress? Dress comfortably. Something simple, American, if that suits you. Great. But I'm curious, how are things going with you and Faith? Only by a thread, if not worse. I can't figure all this out yet. Another topic to talk about. Yes, see you. It had been a tense morning between him and Faith, but the children were at home, so nothing was said openly. Faith told Mark she was going to be gone for a while. She left before lunch. Mark didn't ask where she was going. When Faith left, the kids were busy playing Minecraft, something they were completely captivated by, but didn't say anything to Mark. Mark called a lawyer friend from his former office and asked for the names of the family lawyers. His friend James was surprised, but gave him 2 contacts. Mark made an appointment with a woman named Mary Peters. She answered the call herself. She was alone in her office that day. Mark made an appointment for Thursday. He wanted to understand what might happen if he and Faith divorced or separated. Faith, meanwhile, made an appointment with Harry. She was angry with Mark and wanted to have sex with Harry again. Faith actually spent the night with Harry. Harry said, "How are you and Mark? I hope he's not too upset." "I don't think he cares. I think he's in love with Cindy and doesn't care about what I do." "This doesn't make sense. You have been married for a long time and have small children. One night with Cindy can't outweigh all that." "I thought so too when we switched partners. But since then he hasn't touched me. He invited Cindy to dinner. I think he's really in love with her. You saw how they danced." "Saw. They immediately looked like a couple. If you want your man back, you'll have to do something about it." "What? What can we do?" "We can act like a couple, not just sex. You can tell Mark that you will file for divorce and take the children. This should stop their romance." "It may not be that simple. If I divorce him, he can get custody of the kids because he's always been the one to stay home with them. He may not know this. Threaten. Let's see what happens. But only if he really wants to be with Cindy. If it's just a fling, well, we can take advantage of it." And on this, they agreed. On Thursday afternoon, Mark met with his lawyer. He was informed that, due to their roughly equal income, he and Faith would not have serious financial difficulties in a divorce. For Mark, child custody was an important issue, and he was advised that he had a good chance of getting custody since he was a stay-at-home parent. However, custody will likely be shared, with the primary caregiver retaining the home until the children become adults or there is a change in the agreement. This calmed Mark a little. He was looking forward to Friday's date. It's Friday. There was still tension between Mark and Faith. Mark hasn't touched her since the ball. He made it clear that he was looking forward to his date with Cindy. Faith, in turn, did not hide the fact that she went to Harry to have sex with him again. She thought about keeping it a secret, but her anger at Mark made her talk about it deliberately openly. Besides, she and Harry had already developed their plan. Mark dressed casually for the date and picked Cindy up at 7 p.m. Both were a little nervous. They sat in a restaurant booth and Mark began asking Cindy about her life. She talked about where she grew up, her experience as a dancer, and what she does for a living. Mark, in turn, shared stories about his childhood, family, and marriage. Between conversations, they ordered, ate, and continued the conversation. At one point, Cindy asked Mark if he was ready to leave Faith for her. Mark said he has already consulted with a lawyer and knows the likely consequences. He explained that if he and Cindy got married, his children would likely live with them. Cindy was pleasantly surprised by this. She got along well with her nephews and nieces, even when they stayed with her for short holidays. After dessert, Cindy invited Mark to come back to her house. He agreed, telling Faith in advance that he would likely not return until the next day. When they got to her apartment, they decided to take their time. Their night was magical, filled not only with passion, but also with mutual respect and warmth. The next morning, they both realized that they wanted to be together. "Cindy, I'd like to take you and my kids on a walk," Mark said. "I'm happy to. Where shall we go? Maybe to the zoo." I was thinking of just having a picnic in the park. Good idea. I can make sandwiches and maybe muffins. I'll try to organize it for tomorrow. If it doesn't work out, then definitely next Saturday. When Mark suggested taking the kids on a picnic with Cindy, Faith exploded. They were in their room and the children were playing outside. You bastard, you want to take my children away from me. I can't believe you did this. Faith, I just want them to meet Cindy. If you leave me for this woman, I will take the children. Harry and I will raise them. Harry can move here. I don't think that will happen. Besides, Harry is not a family man, and you know it. You're just bluffing. I'll take the children. Who's the lawyer here? I was told that usually the stay-at-home parent gets custody. It will be me. Oh, Mark, please don't do this to me. Please. Faith began to cry quietly. Her stupid plan with Harry fell apart in an instant. She believed that Mark had already consulted with a lawyer. She was overcome with fear. She felt that she would be replaced by Cindy, all because of her affair with Harry. Are you going to replace me with this woman, Harry's mistress? Can't we go back to what we had? We were happy. We were a family. But Faith, you ruined everything. Although we both ruined it, Cindy and I found something that I want, and you left me for Harry. If it weren't for Cindy, you would still be secretly dating him. But Cindy appeared, and now I have something valuable with her. Just wait, Faith said. Wait and see if you can work it out with her. That's exactly what I do. I want to see how she gets along with children. I want her to become a bigger part of my life. But I don't want to completely push you out of their lives. I can't. But you wanted more than I could give. Now you have it. Maybe you'll have to live with it. Faith turned around and went upstairs. Mark felt terrible. Despite everything she had done, despite her betrayal, he still loved her. But he didn't think he could continue to be her husband. That's how it happened. Cindy and the kids got along great, just as Mark had expected. Over time, he and Faith agreed on a schedule. Faith would spend at least one day every weekend with her children, and sometimes stay with them for the entire weekend. Cindy and Faith discussed their relationship. Sometimes Faith would stay overnight at Cindy's apartment, while Cindy spent the night at the house with Mark. The children quickly got used to the new system. Faith ended her relationship with Harry. She realized that he is not the person she wants to see next to her in the future. The divorce was relatively amicable, as much as possible in such a situation. Faith began dating a work colleague, Steve Mason, another lawyer from her firm. She liked him. He was calm, unmarried, and 2 years younger than her. After some time, she decided to have sex with him. He was pretty good in bed, she told herself, and she thought she could bring him up to her level. Meanwhile, Mark married Cindy. They became a family, but Faith also remained an important part of their lives. At first, Faith and Cindy became just pleasant acquaintances. They later became friends when Cindy helped Faith plan her wedding to Steve. Oh, some women became pregnant in the first year of their new marriage. Faith gave birth to a girl named Ginny. Cindy gave birth to a boy, Stuart, whom everyone called the Bop. The next year, Cindy gave birth to another girl, who was named Annie. Mark and Cindy became interested in competitive bridge. Faith and Steve took all the kids on weekends when the couple went to tournaments. One evening, they were all playing Texas Hold'em. Cindy always won. Faith suddenly announced that she and Steve had to leave early. Why? Cindy asked. Well, Faith answered, we have things to do. Mark, narrowing his eyes, asked, what's going on? I noticed that Steve was on pins and needles the whole time today. What's happened? Faith smiled. He has a problem with lipstick. Mark was stunned. He immediately understood what she meant. He turned to Cindy. Did you tell Faith about this lipstick trick? How could you? Cindy laughed. We are friends now. I decided to share. You know, let her in on a little secret. You're not embarrassed, are you? No, but Steve seems a little embarrassed. Steve blushed, and all three of them looked at him. Maybe we should check, Steve, Faith suggested with a smile. We're leaving, Steve said firmly. He extended his hand to Faith, and she took it, smiling widely. And Harry? After realizing that his usual lifestyle was no longer enjoyable, Harry decided to take a break and sort himself out. He sold his apartment in San Diego and traveled across America, avoiding big cities. Harry discovered that he liked nature and the quiet of small settlements. He felt that his constantly hectic life needed a pause. At one of his stops in Montana, Harry met a man named Charles Randall, who ran a personal development program for men. It was a retreat of sorts, including therapy, physical training, and discussions on the topic of male responsibility. Charles saw through Harry from the first meeting. "You're the kind of person who uses your charm to avoid real problems," he said. Harry decided to stay for a month. This month turned into 6. Harry began to understand his motives and change his approach to relationships. Returning to life after the retreat, Harry got a job as a consultant at a local auto repair shop. It was a small company where he sold not cars, but services for their maintenance. Harry no longer felt the need to demonstrate his charm, but his natural powers of persuasion helped him attract clients. He struck up friendships with the owner of the workshop and his family, feeling real affection for the first time in many years. 2 years later, Harry met a woman named Rachel. She was a widow with 2 children and taught biology at a local school. Their relationship developed slowly, but for the first time, Harry felt genuine care for another person. Rachel was a strong and independent woman who taught Harry that relationships are about not only passion and intrigue, but also mutual respect. Harry and Rachel got married a year after they met. Harry adopted her children and began helping with their upbringing. In the process, he realized that a real family is not only about biological connections, but also about accepting responsibility. His older stepsons became an example to him that trust is the basis of love. Harry sometimes remembered his turbulent youth. He did not regret changing his life, but he understood that he had left behind a trail of destruction. To at least somehow stone, he wrote a book about his mistakes and the path to change. A book called The Master of Seduction Who Lost Himself received recognition for her sincerity and frankness. Harry lectured, spoke at meetings, and motivated people to change their lives. By the age of 60, Harry had found peace. He built a small house overlooking the lake, where he enjoyed fishing and gardening. His book became the basis for the creation of a charitable foundation that helped victims of emotional manipulation in relationships. Harry knew his past would never go away, but he was proud that he had found another way. Subscribe to our channel so that your love doesn't cheat on you, and go ahead and listen to the next story, because this story is nothing compared to the next one. If you're under 18, don't even think click to the next one.